Warmer weather prompts an early start to the season for an iconic Canadian industry. It's not all good news. Unpredictable weather that comes with climate change could pose a serious threat to maple crops.
Torontonians are going to have a real opportunity to think about the city that they want.
What's next for Toronto? With John Tory out, voters will eventually head to the ballot box to choose a new mayor. What lies ahead and the complicated legacy Tory leaves behind.
I just saw that there wasn't enough representation, and
This Family Day weekend, we'll meet a GTA children's book author whose stories celebrate diversity. Plus, we'll check out some other fun events happening this long weekend.
This is CBC Saturday News.
Hello, thanks for being with us on this long weekend. We want to start with some developing news. The Special Investigations Unit has been called in after two men were seriously injured after a police investigation in Liberty Village. Here's what we know right now. The SIU says Toronto Police and the Emergency Task Force were carrying out a warrant at a unit on the 7th floor of that building. Shortly after officers got inside, two men went over the balcony. A 31-year-old man landed on the 4th floor. A 27-year-old man landed on the ground. Both are now in intensive care. We have journalists looking into this. We'll have more online as we learn more details. Well, meantime, one man is dead. One has been arrested after some kind of altercation in Scarborough last night. Police got a call for unknown trouble in the area of Morecambe Gate and Victoria Park just before midnight. A man had been stabbed. He later died in hospital. Police say a suspect, a 27-year-old man from Toronto, is now under arrest. In other news, the warm weather is something many of us have been enjoying this winter. For maple syrup producers all over the province, it means they're tapping trees earlier than usual. Well, that could lead to a bigger crop. As Tyler Cheese shows us, there's some growing concern what it means for the future of the industry.
It boils the concentrate down.
Kent Breeden has been a maple farmer in Alliston, Ontario for 28 years.
We have about 5,000 trees in Alliston here, and then we have 7,500 up in Owen Sound.
This year, because of a warmer than average winter, his family's had to start tapping trees 2 to 3 weeks earlier than usual.
Typically for the maple season, we only make syrup for 25 to 30 days out of the year. So if we see that the weather is going to warm up, if we get a 5 or 6 day trend, we don't want to lose that.
In fact, maple farmers all over the province have been forced to start their season ahead of schedule or risk losing a portion of their crop.
When we do that, we risk losing some sap at the end of the season because the tap holes only stay open for so long.
They say they've had to start earlier and earlier in the past few years, and it's also become harder to predict when the season will begin. Add to that more frequent temperature fluctuations, which often slow sap production.
Now, everything's very transient. It's always changing. You're never quite sure.
Experts say this earlier season is an example of how climate change is affecting local industries.
Our winters are getting warmer here in eastern Canada, where most of the maple syrup in the world is produced. If we take a look at, let's say, a 75-year record, the 6 of the 7 warmest years in that 75 years has occurred since the year 2000.
Peter Kutenbrouwer is writing a book on the history of maple syrup production in Canada.
This is an iconic industry, something that is so vital to our nation and is a huge part of the economy as well. And so I think that we do need to do our part to combat climate change, to protect the industry.
As for Breeden, he says that while he might benefit from warmer temperatures in the short term, he does worry about what it might mean for the future.
It is concerning that the weather is changing so fast. I'm afraid maybe my grandkids, if I have grandkids that make syrup, maybe it will be too warm here to make syrup.
Tyler Cheese, CBC News, Alliston.
Yeah, a lot of us basking in the warm weather, but it can have serious impacts, Sophia.
So Shannon, I actually lost my audio, but I have a feeling that you said something along the lines of warm, sweet taste to our mouths when it comes to the white maple syrup and the early start to the season. Yes, Family Day weekend off to a really nice warm start as well. And we've had an abnormally warm stretch this month in February. So yes, The trees are running. What you need is that ideal freezing temperatures into the overnight period and ideal above zero throughout your daytime with lots of sun. We've had that and then some. For maple syrup, you need at least that 4 degrees sweet spot, and we had 15, 9, 9. In fact, the majority of this month of February has been above seasonal and really April or March like temperatures, which is not so good because if you get a really long warm stretch, as you heard there, it could end that syrup season a little bit earlier. We will hang on to the mild conditions for the early half of this work week. Plenty of sunshine and a day like today for Sunday, but coming up in the long range, we'll talk a little bit more about the potential of an icy and dicey system midweek with a prolonged cold stretch that could end off the month of February and start off the month of March on more of a winter note. That in the long range, Shannon.
Okay, thanks, Sophia. Hopefully we'll get your audio back. Well, after 6 weeks of testimony that featured unprecedented access to cabinet documents, the result, 2,000 pages looking at the so-called Freedom Convoy, the author says the government met the threshold necessary to invoke the Emergencies Act.
I determined that the measures taken by the federal government were, for the most part, appropriate and effective and contributed to bringing a return to order without loss of life or serious injury to people or property. I also found, however, that in a number of respects, these measures were deficient.
He says the Liberal government could have avoided invoking the act if circumstances had been different. He points to what he calls a series of policing failures and says different levels of government should have collaborated more. He's also critical of the Ontario government for its reluctance to become fully engaged in ending the protests in Ottawa. He also said Justin Trudeau likely inflamed the situation by referring to some protesters as a fringe minority. Well, for more, CBC spoke with an associate professor of criminology at the University of Ottawa. He says he's hopeful the report will be a turning point in Canadian federalism.
That's really the message. The underlying message of the Rouleau report is that there is not proper cooperation between our provinces and the federal government. If you boil it right down, basically, provinces take the leading role in action. They are very much the quarterbacks in coordinating what's going on in their provinces. They haven't been doing enough of that. The federal government is very much responsible for setting national standards, running big programs, providing funding where provincial programs meet those standards. There hasn't been enough federal initiative on setting national standards on truly nationally motivated programs. So hopefully that will be the message that people will pick up from this report. The work is only now beginning on remaking the Federation.
We're fighting for our freedoms, our rights, our love, our peace, because there's one word that describes what and who we are, and that is a Latin word. It's ancient. It is invictus. Invictus means unbreakable.
I'm concerned about some of the erosion of what I consider our freedoms being taken away here in Canada.
A couple comments coming there from activists gathering in Toronto today as part of a wider movement sparked by last year's convoy protests. Those attending saying they want their voices heard on a number of issues. Well, for decades, it's been a safe space for the LGBTQ community. Now there's some uncertainty over the future of Hanlan's Point. The concerns all in connection to the possible development of a festival space. Meg Roberts takes a closer look.
For decades, this part of Hanlan's Point, a safe space for LGBTQ. But some in the community say they've been left out of conversations of what the space may look like in the future. A festival space is recommended for the event lawn at Hanlan's according to a draft of the city's parks master plan.
When these elements are introduced without adequate public consultation, I think there is a reasonable cause for people to be alarmed.
Myers is a member of Hands Off Hanlan's, a group that was created when the city went into the third phase of consultations. He says so far the plans are vague and details limited.
Because they don't know what exactly this master plan could be inviting into a space that's been a safe space for a long time.
The city says the idea right now is an outdoor amphitheater within walking distance from the beach, but it says the project is purposely undefined as it seeks public consultation.
The master plan itself is not finished, so it hasn't been gone to council, it hasn't been adopted by council, and so there's still opportunity and time to finesse it.
This longtime LGBTQ advocate says he was in an initial consultation meeting with the city 2 years ago. He says there was no mention of a festival space.
The real wealth of that area, the importance of it is that it is more natural, quieter, less razzmatazz than in the rest of the island, and that's what attracts the people who want to go there.
He's concerned about what increased foot traffic and crowds could mean for the community.
Probably one of the few places where lots and lots of LGBTQ people can come and feel comfortable and not have to worry about harassment and not have to worry about wading through upsetting families because you're hanging out with your gay friends or anything like that. I mean, it has worked. It's worked for the past 50 years, and I don't know why the city would want to change it.
The city says it's consulted with more than 20,000 people during the process, but acknowledges the consultation with LGBTQ members could have been better. It's decided to hold 2 more public meetings, one virtually on the 23rd and another in person on the 27th. Meg Roberts, CBC News, Toronto.
Turning to the city's top job now, and what comes next for the mayor's chair. John Tory handed over power yesterday to Deputy Mayor Jennifer McKelvey. There's a lot of talk this weekend about the legacy Tory leaves behind. One of his big priorities was housing.
We haven't broken ground on any of those sites yet, but affordable housing commitments of the City of Toronto are kind of like New Year's resolutions. We seem to make them every year, but we never went to the gym. We never did the things that we have to do every day in order to reach our targets, reach our goals.
He ran on the Smart Track platform, and that was basically going to be a frequent surface rail line running on the GO Transit system. It was pitched as the one line, the one solution to every problem. And Toronto's transit is far more complex than that.
Toronto had one of the highest vaccination rates of big cities around the world. And we also had a very solid response of daily information, and he was churning it out. And I was part of those meetings in 2018, and he managed that crisis, I think, frankly, masterfully.
We are still waiting details on the timeline for the next by-election to replace the mayor, but many are already looking ahead at what voters can expect. A York University professor says, make no mistake, this election will be drastically different than the last couple.
I think the race is going to be quite competitive, but I think that Torontonians are going to have a real opportunity to think about the city that they want. I think anyone running in John Tory's lane is going to be quite surprised at the amount of support that is not going to be there, right? So I think that that John Tory was very successful at creating a kind of an aura of invincibility the last 2 elections. He wasn't seriously challenged because I think that he did a lot of the political work to make it seem like his re-election was inevitable. However the next election turns out, I think that his legacy could very well be shaped by his successor. That if you get someone in who is elected from a very different political background, who is who's accepting of all these strong mayor powers and uses them to the maximum extent that they can dramatically change Toronto in about in the course of this first term, perhaps more than any mayor without those powers could over several. So I think that people are going to contrast the next mayor's term of office with Tory's, and whether that's fair or not, it is going to happen. And so if the next mayor is wildly popular and wildly successful, that is going to also negatively affect John Tory's legacy, because people will contrast his time in office with theirs and maybe start thinking a bit more about what did he actually achieve, what did he actually do, and more importantly, what did he not do. And so I think that that's going to have an impact as well.
There's all kinds of fun stuff happening across the province for Family Day long weekend. Over at the Art Gallery of Ontario, an author from Mississauga is sharing her books for kids. Feline Campbell says her stories are all about embracing and celebrating diversity.
Hi, Sophie, Grandma replied, sounding unsure. I'm Zoe, Grandma, not Sophie.
The Amazing Zoe series tells the stories of a little girl navigating real-life moments, all inspired by Valine Campbell's own daughter, Zuri.
You know, I was looking through her library, and I'm like, this is nice. I'm always thankful for the gifts that she receives and the thoughtfulness behind it, but I just saw that there wasn't enough representation. You know, and I thought a lot about how I felt growing up. I was born and raised in Mississauga and love my city. I love it through and through. But I went back to thinking what it made me feel like when I was watching TV or reading books or, you know, seeing screens all over the place, billboards and so on. And I just thought, I don't think I want to repeat. I don't want her repeating that. So I thought, instead of requesting it of someone to change it, I'm going to try to change it.
Campbell, a new mom at the time, suddenly found herself writing often late at night as baby Zuri slept. She'd never written stories before. Her background is in healthcare, but the words flowed freely.
Jeremy germlins lived on a planet far away called Varion.
Once her first book about hand washing was done, she decided to self-publish, giving herself the freedom to tell the kinds of stories close to her heart.
Zoe said, let's dress up as royals. Today, I'd like to be the princess. No way, I always play the princess. That's my part, Caitlin demanded. I don't know why you'd want to play the princess anyway. They never look like you. They always look like me.
Her second book, A Queen Like Me, opens a very difficult conversation about race and equity and how we see people for who they are.
I remember writing it and I thought, this may be a little harsh, you know? And I thought, you know what? A conversation about race is okay to talk about very early. That should be introduced right away. I think there's always room for conversations about unicorns and lollipops and those fun things. There's room for them. We got to exercise and explore their imagination. But I also feel children have the capacity to understand real life situations. And we have to understand, as much as we want to shield children from real life situations, even perhaps in your home, they absorb.
Her hope to keep creating and share more stories.
I do. I just want to, you know, reach children, as many children as I can. I want them to recognize the Amazing Zoe and the messages in it. Boys and girls, like all boys and girls, to see something of themselves in her adventures, right? Because Zoe takes adventures. She does all these wonderful things. There's value and an educational yet fun components to the stories for all.
Just lovely. You're looking live now at Toronto. Mostly cloudy out there, feeling like -2, not too bad at all. Sophia is back with us next. She's going to talk about the weather for the rest of your long weekend and the week ahead. We're back in 3 minutes. It is NBA All-Star Weekend, this year's edition taking place in Utah. Pascal Siakam is there to represent the Raps in the All-Star Game. Teammates Scotty Barnes also playing in the Rising Stars Challenge.
Paul Gasol, he's a really talented player, high IQ. Remember, Kobe is my favorite player. He played with Kobe. I used to play with him on 2K, NBA Live. He's amazing.
Barnes' team winning yesterday, and talking about victories, actor Simu Liu was also part of a winning team last night at the NBA All-Star Celebrity Game.
Everybody's shooting at the rough, though. I don't.
Turns out the Marvel actor from Mississauga has a few tricks up his sleeves when it comes to basketball. He scored a 4-point shot in the first quarter of the game. He was part of Miami Heat Dwayne Wade's team alongside Grammy winner 21 Savage and Latin music icon Nicky Jam. Can you hear me now? Oh, she can't. She can't hear me now. So there she is, lovely Sophia.
So Shannon is saying the most wonderful, smart, and impactful things right now. And she hasn't been told that I still have audio issues on my end, but I'm sure it was just an award-winning throw to me. And folks, we can't chat as much as Shannon and I normally do, which is okay this time. I have audio issues, but there's a lot of weather to talk about, so we'll focus more on that for today, especially a big, rather midweek system that will mean snow and an ice event, potentially for many of us. 401 and south, all across southern Ontario. First, though, we are basking in these mild temperatures still for Sunday and Monday to end off Family Day. That won't be a washout by any means. And then look at this. We were talking earlier about maple syrup in the show. You will get back into cold days and cold nights, which should extend that maple syrup season a little bit. Cold weather comes midweek along with that big midweek system, the path of a Colorado low, smack dab in the middle of this area of cold Arctic high pressure that will take us back down to seasonal and below temperatures. What's this going to mean is a Wednesday evening and all-day Thursday event with snow to cottage country and up towards Ottawa and Montreal. And then everybody sort of 401 and south is looking at ice pellets, mixing, and even freezing rain down to the south. This is still a few days out. This is very track dependent, folks, so it could shift a little bit and maybe be more of a snow story as we head into the next few days. I will have more for you tomorrow evening and hopefully be able to chat with my good friend Shannon. In the meantime, enjoy a mild Sunday with breaks of sun and a Family Day that won't be a washout, a few showers and a few light flurries up towards the north and towards the east. Shannon, take it away with something very eloquent, I'm sure.
We can just make hand gestures. That's okay. Look at her smile. That's all we need. Canadian skier Laurence Saint-Germain making history today. She won the women's slalom at the World Alpine Ski Championships, and it's the first Canadian world title in the event since 1960. She stood third after the first run, but her second trip down the mountain vaulted her to the top of the podium. She hails from just north of Quebec City. Her best previous finish at a world championship was 6th. And just before we go, we want to take you to downtown Toronto, the 17th annual Bloor Yorkville Ice Fest. It's a free event kicking off today. There's more than 60,000 pounds of ice as well as live ice carving demos. It goes all weekend. We hope you have a great night and we'll see you